Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Taisha, and my cat Warlock over here in the corner. So if you clicked on my video, then you are interested in a bit of information about the Praxis 5038 test, which I finally passed. So I said, let me make a video and kind of share my little bit of wealth of knowledge with you, and hopefully it'll help you be successful. So I live in the state of North Carolina. You have to pass your Praxis. In order for you, let me back up. In order for you to be certified in the state of North Carolina, for me, for the avenue I took, you had to do two things. One, take ETPA, which I took 2 springs ago, and then pass your Praxis that matches up with your field. For me, it was English 5038. And once you do those two things, you can be a certified teacher. So the only thing I was waiting for was my Praxis. And if you know anything about the Praxis, is a very hard test to take. It's, I believe, 160 questions. It's either 130 questions and you have 160 minutes, one or the other. And you need a 167 to pass in the state of North Carolina. The first time I took it 3 times. The first time I took it, I got a 166 and I cried my eyes out because I was 1 point off. The second time I took it, I got a 153 and I was mad at myself because I didn't realize that there were two separate tests, versions of the test that you could get, and I wasn't prepared for that. And the third time I got a 175 and I cried when I walked out because I was like, yes, I don't have to do this again because it is so stressful. And it's a lot of money I had to pay every single time. I know some teachers, their school district will pay, not my school district. So yeah, it was very overwhelming. So these are kind of some of the things that I did for me to be successful. First things first, you have to figure out how you study and test. You know, what kind of study are you? Are you a note taker? You know, are you an annotator? Are you a crash the night before? Or cram the night before, which I do not recommend you cram for this test the night before. I don't think that's a wise decision, but you have to figure out how you test or study and test. For me, I'm an anxious test taker. Like, I get really nervous and I tend to forget everything that I've studied before I take the test, which is why it took me like 5 semesters to finally pass 3 semesters worth of French, because I'm an anxious test taker. So you have to figure out how you test. And then the next thing I would recommend you do is buy this book. This is the Praxis Study Guide 5038. I will leave it linked down below. A lot of people in the comment sections, when I went to go buy this book, I kind of just did like a quick run through the comments, and some people were like, oh, this is kind of pointless. There wasn't a lot of information in there. It's stuff you should already know. And for me, I found it beneficial because the editors or writers broke it down into 3 parts. And if you know anything about your Praxis is broken down into 3 sections that you're tested on. Reading, language use and vocab, writing, speaking, listening. And I should point that they don't test you, or they don't ask you questions in those categories in that category. Like, it's very random, the questions they throw at you. So the way this book is broken down is each section has basic information, right? So information to kind of get you started, and then after the section they quiz you, and then after the quiz they give you all the answers with the explanations. So what I did was I would go through, study it, and then I would take the quiz. So this is an example of the quiz. I would take the quiz, and then I would have one of my teenagers score it for me, because what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to see what the right answers were, because I wanted to understand, okay, why am I getting this wrong? What did I look at wrong? Did I read it incorrectly? And then I would go back and restudy it. So that's the first thing I recommend you do. Get this book. The second thing, for me, I got a membership to study.com, which is a website that has like thousands of courses and videos on anything you can kind of fathom in the world. I believe, it cannot be just English, but I've always used it for the English side of it. I think they have other things, but anyways, I got a subscription for that. Now, it is $70 a month. So it's definitely an investment. I got it in the spring when I took my first Praxis. Yeah, I've taken it 3 times this year. And I will probably cancel it at the end of this month because I don't need it anymore. But I felt like it was beneficial while I utilized it. So what you do is you just type in the Praxis you're studying, and I typed in Praxis 5038. and you say set a plan, and it sets you on a plan, and you just kind of work your way through all the courses. I believe there are 78 courses in the Praxis 5038 program. I did not do all those. It starts with literary criticism, and so I kind of read through all the literary criticism, and then I just kind of cherry picked what section I need. The cool thing about it is, though, once you put in all your information, they will send you like text messages and updates and say, hey, you're behind on your schedule, we need to get back into it, and stuff like that. So it is pretty cool in that way that it kind of holds you accountable. But like I said, I thought it was good for the pieces that I needed. So that's kind of an investment that you'll have to think about for yourself. Is it worth it? And then the next thing I do is, the way I learn and study is, I'm a writer and a note taker and an annotator. So I would just basically, as I'm going through everything, write it down, annotate, then find me tips and tricks that I can use to kind of help remember it, right? And then just keep studying and studying and studying. The week before I took my Praxis, I basically spent 8 hours every day studying. And that's another thing. You got to give yourself enough time in the day. I think it's probably best if you can do it to take your Praxis in the summer. That way you can spend, 8 hours a day studying, maybe the week before the way I did, because I found that when I was trying to study while I was working full time as a teacher. I was also in school finishing my master's, and trying to study for a Praxis. It was overwhelming. So I think one of the reasons why I was successful this time is because I didn't have anything else on my plate. So if you can, take it in the summer. If you can't, then you're just going to have to adjust. You maybe spend your weekends just studying. So those are kind of like my tips for me that maybe will help you. The next thing is, when you register for your Praxis, they're going to give you access to a study test. Don't sleep on that study test. Take it, take it, take it. Take it over and over and over and over and over again. Take it, go over the answers, walk away from it, take it again. Go over the answers, walk away from it. Do it, do it, do it, do it. Now, you get the first one for free. There are 2 other editions. I paid for both editions. So I had 3 different versions of the Praxis study test. I felt, for me, the first and the third one were the most beneficial. The second one I didn't find beneficial at all. When you take the test, it is the exact same questions in the exact same order every single time. So don't think you're going to get a different set of questions in a different order. It's the exact same questions each and every time. But the reason why it works is because it's repetition. I often find that when we're taking tests like this, repetition is the best way to learn in this instance. So yes, what I did was, when I took the test, the practice test that you get when you pay for your registration to take your Praxis test, after I finished the test, or actually during the test, if there was a word that I came across or a question and I was like, I don't understand this, I've never seen this before, I would jot it down. I had this piece of like scrap paper as an envelope. I just jotted it down. That way, when I was done with the test, I could go research it. So I took the test, and then I got my score back. And the cool thing is, after you're done taking the test, they give you the right answer at the bottom, and then they give you an explanation. Read those explanations, because a lot of times it clicks and you're like, okay, that makes more sense. So what I did was, if I got something wrong, I literally just wrote it down. That way, when I was doing my study guide, I tore some of my sheets out. When I was creating a study guide for myself, I just wrote those down, and then this is what I need to be working on. Okay, what is this? What is this? So I did that for both versions of the test. And I think that's kind of the big tips and tricks. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. There are a lot of classic works of literature that I have not read. Yes, I'm an English major. I studied English in college. I love English. I love literature. I love being an English teacher. But I have not read every classic work. I've yet to read The Great Gatsby. I have yet to read The Crucible. I have yet to read The Scarlet Letter. And yes, I teach 11th grade. I just don't teach those texts to my 11th grade students. I am thinking about teaching The Great Gatsby this year, but that's a whole nother video. So you will need to know those authors and their respective works. You will need to know Joseph Conrad, The Heart of Darkness. I did read The Heart of Darkness. I read it in college. Herman Melville, who wrote collection of books about spies. You will need to know things like a dramatic monologue, a ballad stanza, the rape of the lock, a mock epic. You will need to know okay, so on the practice test, they talk about King Lear, but I found that when I took both versions of the test, there was not a question about King Lear. So if you know about King Lear, then that's one for the team, but I didn't find there's any questions about King Lear on either version of the Praxis test that I took. You will need to know what a sonnet is. You will need to know what a Shakespearean sonnet is, which honestly, the trick to know if it's a Shakespearean sonnet, I told this to my students, is it 14 lines? Is it the rhyme scheme that is a Shakespearean sonnet? Then it's a Shakespearean sonnet. Anything, if the author wrote before Shakespeare, then it's not a Shakespearean sonnet. What else? You will need to know, and this for the test, the different rubrics. So holistic rubric, an analytical rubric, why you would make a rubric. You need to know those things. What else? You need to know, let me tell you this right now. You, on both Praxis tests, now these are the actual tests that I set down at the testing center, I felt that the majority of the questions were strategies. So on the test, and I will tell you this now, on both versions of the sit down actual Praxis test, they question you on a lot of various strategies, classroom strategies, L strategies. So how would you teach vocabulary to an ELL student? You need to know all the different strategies. So the KWL strategy, what is a Socratic seminar? What is SQ3R? What is jigsaw? Learn all of those because they will question you on those. I've saw them on both versions of the Praxis test. Know what a word wall is. There were a lot of questions that said, that kind of were, what is the purpose of a journal in a classroom? How would you introduce new vocab to L students? Tons of questions on that. So know your strategies, know your teaching strategies. I made a little cheat sheet. So, let me get my cheat sheet out real quick for you guys. As soon as I got home after I took my my passing Praxis and kind of like adjusted myself, I basically wrote down everything I can remember. So I'm just going to start at the top of my little cheat sheet and work my way down. Know your parts of speech. The main ones: noun, pronoun, verb, adjective, adverb. Know those. There was a drop down question and it basically had four sentences, and then you had to match what type of sentence was it, based on the parts of speech. And so the parts of speech were kind of like italicized and bolded, so you'll know. And it was a noun, an adjective, an adverb, and a verb. So know those things. And it doesn't seem, you may think, oh, well, that's simple. They almost kind of trick you a little bit. So really understand what those parts of speech are and how to recognize them. You will need to know sentence structure. So simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, compound complex sentence. There was a question that said, what type of sentence is this? And I'm telling you, it wasn't a simple sentence. So understand the difference between those sentences. You will need to know clauses, or what a clause is. You will need to know the phrases. So like a prepositional phrase, a noun phrase, understand what those are and how to recognize them. There was a question on that. You will need to know coordinated conjunctions and why you use them, how you use them. So the fanboy, so for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Understand how to recognize in a sentence a comma splice, passive voice, relative clause, pronoun reference, comma, subject verb agreement, modifier. There were a lot of questions that said, what is this what is this sentence an example of? And it would give you the sentence, and the answer would be dangling modifier, comma splice, misplaced verb agreement, subject verb agreement, and I think one more. So you will have to recognize, okay, what is this sentence an example of? And then you will definitely need to understand parallelism. So like I was walking, running, hiking, And a lot of, even my students always mess this up when I question or quiz them on this, because the question will be, or the sentence will be, I was walking, running, and I went for a hike. And they think it's correct. And it's like, no, if you're walking, running, you also need to be hiking. That ing needs to be repeated, throughout the entire sentence. So understand how to recognize that there is a question on that. The question literally was, and I remember it because I was so happy that I saw it, because I was like, ooh, that's a good example to use for my students. It was highlighted and it said, what is this highlighted section an example of? And if I'm remembering correctly, it was parallel structure, because it used the ing 3 times. Oh, this is a big one. I don't remember this on the test I took last time, but it is on the test, because I remember teaching this to my 9th graders because they didn't understand it. So the question is, in Romeo and Juliet, when Juliet says, wherefore art thou Romeo, what does the wherefore mean? And it means why, not where. Most of my students would answer why, because where, because it's saying wherefore art thou. No, why are you Romeo? Why do you have to be Romeo? Why does it have to be you who I fall in love with? So that question is on the Praxis. It was on the middle one I took, not the ones that I took twice. And then know how the site works in both MLA and APA. There are questions. I don't remember exactly the questions, but there are questions on MLA and APA citation. So understand not only how to do it, but how to recognize it. And then there was a question that says, what is the one thing that's unique about citations? And the answer was essentially the fact that you have to put the date something was accessed. So if you access an article today, then you have to put that in the citation. So know that. And then where else? Know the periods of literature, and know what literary criticism is. There was a question, and I remember it because I love Frankenstein. The question was, what literary time period is Frankenstein's author Mary Shelley from? And it was Romantic period. So you need to understand time periods and famous authors from no time period. Not all of them, but that is the one question that I do remember that is from, the time period question. So understand all the time periods. And then also you need to know that, Beowulf is Old English, and then Middle English is like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Definitely read and understand William Blake's The Tiger poem, because there is 3 questions based on that poem. And it's basically a metaphor about God and, creation and stuff like that. But I would definitely study it. These are the books that you will need to know. And for me, I haven't read any of these books, but I've studied enough literature to understand how to analyze a section and just kind of pick and choose the right answer. But The Great Gatsby, there were 3 questions about The Great Gatsby. In the dinner scene, The Crucible, I've never read The Crucible, but there were some questions about the male characters and something about like a church scene. There was a question from To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was about dialogue. There was actually a question about To Kill a Mockingbird in both versions of the test, because every time I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm not a fan of To Kill a Mockingbird as a text. So it's like, it was definitely coming back to haunt me. Know the difference between than and then. There was a question about that. And then you will need to definitely know why each one of these are used. An online glossary, a spell checker, a dictionary, a thesaurus, a style manual, and an encyclopedia. There are questions about why you would use those, what they're used for, so you need to know all of those. There were several questions on L students, which I've just talked about. So you will need to understand these strategies, an anticipation guide, background building, kinesthetic learning, literary circles, think, pair, share, Socratic seminars, and jigsaws. Understand all of those. You will also need to understand persuasive strategies. So pathos, logos, ethos. You will need to understand logical fallacies. There were 3 questions about logical fallacies. They basically geared towards the emotional appeal, loaded words, and snob appeal. And there was one that's about plain folks. There was basically a picture of a guy in a pair of overalls, and it basically said, "We get it done right for you." And it was like, what type of logical fallacy is being used here? And I answered plain folks because that was the only one that made sense. Understand figurative language, understand vernacular language and what that is, understand code switching and why we would use code switching. Please understand points of view. So first person, second person, third person limited, third person omniscient. Understand the different types of rubrics. So holistic rubric, an analytical rubric, a primary trait scoring rubric, a self-assessment rubric. Understand your modes of writing. So narrative, argumentative, descriptive, informative, expository, when we would use those. They did ask questions about the process of writing, so planning, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. I think one of the questions was, when would you want to essentially put students in an editing group in the stage of writing? So obviously, I think that was the question. It was something like that, but you definitely need to know those. This is a possible question. Which of the following is an important principle of process of writing? Students may need to move back and forth through the writing stages. That was the answer. At which stage do students do peer editing? In the editing stage. Which URL extension is credible? .gov. Know why the others are not. So .net, .com, .org. There was a ton of questions on speeches. So like, when I say speeches, when you stand up in front of an audience and give a speech, there were a lot of questions about speeches. A lot of them were, eye contact, what information could you remove from a PowerPoint slide, or something about like the information on a PowerPoint slide. And then these are some famous authors and their works. The ones with, this was the notes I was making myself, the ones with the asterisks are the ones that were on the test in the matching set. So yes, at the beginning of the test, they basically have you match the author with the work. Things Fall Apart by, I always say her name wrong, Akibe. It's an African story. Anthem by Anne Ryan. Lord of the Flies, The Bluest Eyes. You need to know that Toni Morrison wrote Beloved. The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. The Woman Warrior by Maxine Kingston. Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Flies. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Why can't I speak? It's because I'm trying to get all this out without making this video super long. The Giver by J.D. Salinger and The Crucible by Arthur Miller. That's kind of my cheat sheet. Maybe what I'll do is, because it's a Google Doc, I'll just link it down below and you can make a copy of it once I clean it up a little bit. But yeah, those were the questions that I definitely remember. Hopefully this helped you. I'm at 25 minutes, so hopefully this video helped you. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section. I will try to answer it for you. If you've taken the Praxis 5038 and you have some information you want to add to it, also leave that down in the comment section. You know, it's just a community here of people just trying to be certified as teachers. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I don't often ask for a subscribe or a like in any of my videos, but if you did get anything from it, can you just hit like for me so I can know that, you know, it is beneficial. You don't have to subscribe to my channel. I only make videos during the summer anyway. So yeah, again, if you have any questions, just throw them down below. Bye.